Good morning. Thank you, Chad. Welcome. We're glad that you're here with us. I'll be sharing training today with Heather Winkleplex, so thanks to her in advance too. We're glad you could join us. We're going to talk about what implementation fidelity is, why it's important, and how to measure it with your community strategies. This is a really important part, or important piece that sometimes gets overlooked, but is really critical. And we're hoping today we'll be able to kind of explain to you what it is and why it's so important and how we're going to be measuring it. So before we jump into fidelity, let's make sure we understand first what we mean by implementation. And when we talk about implementation, it really involves three main tasks. First is mobilizing support for your efforts and building capacity around implementation. Second is implementing evidence-based programs, policies, and practices with paying specific attention to any adaptations or fidelity issues, which is what we're going to talk more about today. And third is monitoring implementation, collecting evaluation data, and making mid-course corrections based on what the results or your outcomes are showing. So in other words, it's taking a strategy and putting it into action by first building capacity and then carrying out the required components of the program and finally collecting data, monitoring, and making adjustments as needed. So let's start with the what. What is implementation fidelity? When we talk about fidelity, it's kind of a funny word, but we mean delivery of practices in the way they were designed and intended to be delivered accurately and consistently. So designed and intended by whom? Well, by the program developer or the researchers that did the work behind the program. Accurately and consistently means doing things in a systematic way over time. So very basically, implementation fidelity is the extent to which the planned program, what you have planned to do, matches the implemented program, what you actually did do. Without implementation fidelity assessment, so assessing fidelity, nothing is really known about what occurred during the program. We would only know what was planned if we didn't also assess it. And we know that sometimes what we plan can be very different from the actual implemented program. So we need to incorporate this fidelity into the assessment cycle. And the first step for doing that is program differentiation. So we need to know the degree to which the critical components of a program or a strategy are different or distinguishable from each other and from other programs. So how do we do this? The first step is to define your program or strategy. So by that we mean find the most fundamental aspect of fidelity assessment, define the specific ways in which you can assess whether the features or activities actually occurred and to evaluate them with quality. So let's take an example. Think about Life Skills Program for middle schools. That's a prevention education program that many people are familiar with. So first, we want to know the program structure that's needed to meet the objectives. So when we're thinking about structure, we know that it's focused on Life Skills Middle Schools is for grades 6 through 9. It's designed to be taught in a building in a sequence of over 3 years. Sessions are 30 to 45 minutes in length, and it's taught 2 to 3 times per week until the program is complete. We also need to know the program's objectives. Well, the program is designed to increase personal self-management skills. It's designed to increase social skills. It's designed to increase drug resistance skills. We also need to know the intended outcomes of the program. So what do we expect to see or have happen? Well, we hope that there's an increase in the percentage of youth reporting that they can resist pressures to use tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs. And finally, we also need to clarify the commitment of the program objectives. We need to, for example, ensure that there's training for teachers with a clear understanding of the program details, the commitments of the program, and what the requirements are for implementation fidelity. So by all this, we're saying that you have to define and really know all the program components, the main components. That's part of program differentiation. Then we can talk about fidelity. So there's 4 main components to fidelity implementation: exposure, adherence, quality, and engagement. So first, we're going to talk just a little bit about exposure. And by that we mean the amount of the actual program delivered in relation to the amount prescribed by the program model. So this includes the number of sessions or contacts, the attendance, the frequency, and the duration of sessions. We'll give some examples here in a little bit. In terms of adherence, we're talking about the extent to which the program components are delivered as prescribed by the model. In other words, how well you adhered or stuck to the plan using all the required components. So adherence indicators can include the program content, methods, and activities. Adherence is typically reported as the proportion of program components that were actually delivered compared to the number that are prescribed by the program. Quality of delivery is the manner in which the program is delivered. Aspects of delivery quality can include provider preparedness, use of relevant examples, enthusiasm, respectfulness, confidence and ability to respond to questions and to communicate clearly. So we know that even if program, for example, exposure, the dosage, frequency, duration is covered completely, but the delivery is delivered poorly or is not communicated well, positive outcomes may not happen because of this component of fidelity. And then finally is engagement or participant responsiveness. This refers to the way participants react to or engage in a program. This can include the level of interest in the program, perception about the relevance and usefulness of the program, level of engagement, enthusiasm, and a willingness to engage in discussion and activities. Participant responsiveness may play a direct role in the outcomes you get from your strategies. For example, if participants are not responding well, or a provider may decide to omit or modify or add program content or activities. In other words, changing the program. Okay. We're going to see what each of these components, these 4 components, consist of. Looking first particularly for prevention education programs. So this is specific to programs such as All Stars, Life Skills, Too Good for Drugs, Keep a Clear Mind, Too Smart to Start, for example. And we'll go through each of these to help understand what we're talking about in terms of the components. So let's start with exposure. Again, that was to assess the extent to which all participants in the program fully receive each component of the program. So this includes the full frequency of the program. In other words, how often it takes place. So in our example of Life Skills, it's designed to be administered twice per week. The impact of the program might be diluted if it were presented only once per week or presented with a different frequency. So full frequency is important. Exposure is also concerned with the dosage of the program. So facilitators intend for students to receive a full dose of each program component, but we know sometimes that doesn't happen. So that means if a planned 30-minute session receives only 20 minutes of time, students aren't exposed to the full curriculum. That means they may not have the opportunity to learn to the extent intended by the program. And that sometimes happens, and that can negatively impact outcomes. So we're seeing why sometimes we're administering programs and maybe we're not getting the outcomes we're expecting. It's because we're not fully doing it with fidelity, with exposure. In addition to frequency and dosage, it's duration. It's also an important part of exposure. And by duration, we mean whether everyone was exposed to each aspect of the component or the program curriculum. So, for example, Life Skills consists of 18 sessions. Okay. We would not expect positive outcomes if half of the participants skipped or missed all or part of the program. The curriculum aligned with the objective. So even if programming was presented for the intended duration and with high quality, the program may appear ineffective simply because participants did not receive the full opportunity or the full implementation of the program. So exposure includes program frequency, dosage, and duration. And for our life skills, what those means, what frequency, dosage, and duration means, is 2 times per week for 30 to 45 minute sessions for 18 sessions. And so that would be the full exposure of the program as it was designed. When we talk about adherence, this addresses whether or not specific program features were implemented. So did participants have an opportunity to acquire the skills and knowledge needed to meet the outcomes? We need to evaluate if the opportunities were provided as planned. This is often done by a site visit. That's where someone can come to view the program live or in action to see if the components are being taught or being implemented. So for example, life skills sessions on a session on alcohol myths and realities, the observer doing a site visit would want to check if the curriculum, which teaches key skills identified by the program developer, were being used. So are they actually using the curriculum as intended? That youth were considering pros and cons and separating fact from fiction to identify myths or realities. Often a Fidelity checklist is used by observer to check for the program adherence. And so when we're talking about adherence, again, with life skills, there's a script, and we're checking, for example, to see that there's a script in the curriculum that is being followed, teaching the key skills. Are they adhering to the program as planned? Quality of delivery, the caliber of delivered program features or components. So quality and use of best practices are essential components of implementation fidelity. Implementers could deliver all program features and have very high adherence, for example. If they did a poor job of it, the program was not fully implemented. We've all kind of been to presentations or programs where the information was presented too quickly or in kind of an unorganized manner that just didn't make any sense, and you came away from it feeling like you weren't fully getting what was intended. Quality could be assessed by an auditor during a site visit or a live visit. So in our example of life skills, for life skills, quality of delivery meaning that the trainer is prepared and the curriculum is well presented. The training location environment is appropriate. Engagement and responsiveness. The final component of implementation fidelity is engagement. How receptive or actively engaged are those exposed to the program? As we talked about, it doesn't matter if a trainer or teacher delivers all the planned curriculum in a high school in a high quality manner for the intended duration, frequency, and dosage. Students will not be impacted if they're disengaged. So instead of making the assumption that the program is being offered to a highly responsive audience, you really have to assess if that's actually the case. And this can help explain why well-implemented programs may be associated with poor outcomes. So in our life skills, we need active participation. So for life skills, that means that students are engaged in the content, they're actively attending and participating. And engagement can also be assessed by asking students to self-report on their level of attention or by the observation of an auditor or the person being implemented. Okay. On the last slide, we were talking about assessing fidelity through live visits or site visits, and that's the main way that we measure fidelity for prevention education programs. And again, those are the programs All-Stars, Life Skills, Too Good for Drugs, that have a particular curriculum and that have been proven to be effective by a program developer. So for the Kansas Prevention Collaborative and the KPC grantees, we use a fidelity by using a checklist during the course of a site visit. A fidelity checklist should be completed in the middle of an implemented prevention education program. So if you're doing prevention education program, this is something you need to be aware of. So we have the modern fidelity, this is the checklist, and as you can see at the top, it has the date, the time of the site visit, the end of the visit, the program observed, the lesson number. If you're doing 18, if there's 18 sessions, you would want to record which session you're observing, and the session title, and then participant demographics, whether it's particularly, for example, Life Skills has elementary, middle school, and high school. There may be other adult prevention education type programs, so you would circle that. Okay. The checklist measures aspects from all 4 components of fidelity, so exposure, adherence, quality, and engagement. And you'll see on the left-hand column there's a place for rank. And so you're going to be looking, if you would go to a site visit, you're going to look to see, okay, was the facilitator prepared for the lesson? The second one there, the facilitator gave clear instructions to participants. So you would either rank that as 3, yes, they fully demonstrated this component. 2, they partially demonstrated the component, or 1, that was not demonstrated. And at the end, there's a total score across all categories for available points. So who needs to complete the fidelity check? Who needs to be doing this? It kind of depends on who's implementing the program. If a coalition member completes, if there's someone outside of the coalition, for example, school district personnel that are actually implementing the program, someone from your coalition, a coalition member, could complete the fidelity checklist if someone else is implementing. And the checklist, as you can see, is pretty straightforward. But prior to going out for a site visit or using the checklist, you'll want to meet with your community support specialist who will offer some specific assistance if you have regarding techniques or feedback to implementers who maybe didn't demonstrate full fidelity. So in order to accurately complete the checklist, the coalition member will need to be very informed about the program requirements. You'll need to know what the requirements are that you're checking for when you're doing a site visit. Now, there may be times when it's actually someone within your coalition that's implementing a strategy. And if that's the case, we don't want to necessarily put anyone on the spot. So in that case, your DECA community support specialist or Greenbush staff could complete the fidelity checklist as part of the evaluation. And again, this should be done somewhere mid-cycle, probably early to mid-cycle of a program. You don't want to wait too long, because if there are changes that need to be made or addressed in how the program is being implemented, we need to address that so that it can be improved before you're done, because you sure hate to get to the end and say, oh, we didn't do that right, or we could have done that better. So there's the checklist for site visits for prevention education programs. And before I go on, are there any questions, or do we want to save those for the end?
Lisa, there haven't been any questions added to the chat, okay. But
I think if you have questions about, particularly about this fidelity checklist, and we'll go on. So before we were talking about prevention education, let's look now at what implementation fidelity means for environmental strategies. So things such as It Matters, sticker shock, retailer training, town hall meetings, policy and practice changes. So fidelity has the same components for environmental strategies as it does for prevention education. We're still looking at exposure, adherence, quality of delivery, and engagement. But unlike prevention education programs, there isn't a specific curriculum to follow or a nicely kind of detailed plan of how to implement that some designer necessarily gave you. So with environmental strategies, they're often more flexible and they're able to be tailored to your community, which is good, but it may be a little more difficult to measure. So in these cases, there are still typically some core components that should be included in the coalition strategy action plan that outlines best practices for implementation. So the way we're going to look at measuring implementation fidelity for environmental strategies is the coalition's adherence to your action plan for that strategy. So for example, if you're doing sticker shock and we're going to check to see that you're adhering to your action plan and the action steps that you've taken. So in terms of exposure, what would that mean? Frequency, dosage, and duration again, ensuring that the events occur when stated in the action plan with the frequency intended. So have you done what you said you were going to do? But this is why it's so very important that the action steps provide enough detail regarding frequency, dosage, and duration that we can tell exactly what you have planned to do. So events occur when stated in the action plan with the frequency intended. Adherence is basically sticking to the plan. Completion of all action steps is written in the action plan. And just with prevention education, if you leave out steps, you can't really expect to get the desired outcomes. You have to stick to the plan, completing all the necessary steps or those active ingredients of your plan. Think about environmental strategies related to quality of delivery. Again, it's use of best practices, communication of intended messages in culturally inclusive and professional manner. Engagement is still active participation. It's important that messages are tailored to the group of interest and disseminated where the group will engage. A good example of this is if you're targeting youth, you want to make sure in environmental strategies like media campaigns, you want to make sure your message appeals to the youth and is disseminated where the youth gather, either physically or through social media, so that you can truly actively engage them. So this diagram or this flow chart kind of shows how the Kansas Prevention Collaborative measures and monitors implementation of your strategic plan and measures fidelity of implementation for environmental strategies. We have the site visit checklist for prevention education. We do something like this, and we'll go through this for environmental strategies. So basically, Greenbush reviews all of your CCD entries and compares with your most recent quarterly report, compares to your logic modeling, to your action plan documents, and we complete kind of a rubric that's on the workstation, and we'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. And then we notify DECA and KDADS when our review has been done. We've looked at your action plan, seeing if your checkbox entries match what you're doing in your action plan. So again, are you having fidelity to your action steps and your action plan? And then we send it to, we let them know, DECA and KDADS know that the reviews are complete. DECA then reviews the rubric and provides clarification to Greenbush or has inquiries for you to follow up on. And then if needed, if there are concerns about compliance, then we're to KDADS to actually address with grantees. And most of this work we're doing, we're housing on the workstation, so we all have access to it at all times, so that kind of communication. And then Greenbush completes a rubric as part of that quarterly report review, looking at each of the areas listed first in the kind of the top green, the light blue. Okay, and components are much like they were on the Fidelity Checklist. They're rated as 3 is fully demonstrated, 2 is partially demonstrated, or 1 is not demonstrated. So if there are areas on that quarterly report that are not fully demonstrated, we let DECA know as part of that flow chart, and then DECA, the community support specialist, provide technical assistance for the coalition for improvement. So for the area in the dark blue, related to environmental strategies such as, again, it matters, sticker shock, retailer training, Greenbush compares the action steps for the quarter based on your community checkbox entries and your quarterly reports. And after the review is complete, again, Greenbush loads the rubric to the workstation, emails KDADS and DECA letting them know the documents are ready for a secondary review by KDADS, and contacts communities to request additional action if needed. If for example, if the rubrics components have a 1 or a 2, if they're not fully demonstrated. Then the DECA support specialist contacts the community to follow up, again, providing technical assistance around modification, seeing what the barriers are potentially, to troubleshoot anything that might be going on. And they share the course of action and the date completed to Greenbush and to KDADS through a checklist on the workstation, and notifies the resource team through email. So there's kind of this feedback loop in this process of keeping everyone on board. So that's the 2 ways that we're monitoring fidelity for prevention education programs, through the checklist and through this implementation monitoring plan for environmental strategies, which is comparing your activities to your action plans. Are there any questions on those 2 processes?
Yeah, Lisa, there's a question from Callie. She asked, can we see our rubric from last year, or is it listed somewhere?
The rubrics are on the, I would believe so. The rubrics are on the workstation. I think they're part of our KPC contractor themes. We'll check with KDAD and make sure. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to see those. So yeah, but we'll need to clear that with KDAD. So I would say yes, but let's get that permissions first and get back with you.
Yep. Thanks, Lisa. That's all for questions in the chat. Does anyone else have a question?
Okay. If not, I'm going to turn this over to Heather, make her presenter, and we'll go on from here. Thank you, and now we'll have Heather take over.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just pulling up the screen now. And so, oops, kind of went a little bit far, so I'll backtrack. So thinking about what Lisa just shared and thinking essentially why then is Fidelity so important when you are in the implementation component? You've done a lot of work over the past couple of months in identifying what strategies and what is going on within your community so that you could identify those evidence-based strategies that will have an impact and you will get an expected outcome. So when thinking about that, if you have a plan that very much follows that is intended of your evidence-based strategies, you will get your expected outcome. So as you see here, if X is your evidence-based practices, then Y will get you to your expected outcomes. When you are doing these strategies, it is assumed that you're going to be using the practice just as it was intended. And so I hope you can really see where monitoring the fidelity is important. It's essentially saying you're doing the evidence-based practice, the strategy, how it was intended to be done. So that way you will get the intended outcome. Achievement of high implementation fidelity is one of the best ways of replicating that success. And so you're sticking to the original research, and so you're basically ensuring that what you've selected will have its intended outcome. When you think about monitoring your fidelity, one of the things that I want to share with you now is a scenario we're going to look at 4 resulting from pairing implementation fidelity assessment results with outcome assessment results. And so when you're looking at this specifically, you're going to see that the vertical, which is, I always think the easiest way to explain it is verticals up and down and horizontals side to side laying down. But when you look at this specifically, the horizontal level fidelity is from low to high, and the vertical outcomes from unfavorable to favorable. And so low fidelity and unfavorable outcomes, when we see 3, outcomes assessment results were poor, and fidelity assessments show that the program had not been implemented as planned. The outcomes were not reflective of the planned program. So those poor outcome measures might be due to poor planned program implementation, which can then be fixed or changed before implementing the next cycle. This is what we need to assess. So thinking about this specifically, thinking back to slide 7, where Lisa was talking about exposure, frequency, adherence, engagement, quality of delivery. So perhaps what was happening here in the implementation, that the exposure was not being followed, and so they were not maybe sticking to the number of programming in the sense of where there was maybe 10 sessions, but they only shared 8. That can definitely have an impact as far as what is likelihood to be successful or not successful. Our next having a little fun with my computer. It likes to act crazy right in the middle of trainings. When we think about that in the high fidelity but unfavorable outcomes, it might be because the results indicated poor performance was not due to a poor program implementation, but are different types of programs may need to address this objective. It appears the program is not working. Thus, the resources should be allocated to replace or modify the existing program. So we need to modify or correct. Low fidelity and favorable outcomes is found in the scenario. Say, for example, students increase significantly from pre to post test. Typically, we just look at outcomes and say, hey, this is great. This worked. We assume the program is super effective. Typically, we just say, hey, this is what we need to do. But with the fidelity data, it indicates programming tied to the objective was not implemented. So, for example, the session of myths on alcohol was skipped. Maybe a teacher was sick, and so we didn't have that session. So the students may not have even learned that information. And so what happens is that it may be, without the fidelity data, we may be really connecting the likelihood of this program doing well without really knowing how or how it did not work effectively. Finally, we have scenario 2. Or excuse me, and we look at scenario 2 and we look at scenario 1. Sorry, I've kind of got out of my scenarios, keep going different ways. So when we look at this one, we see where a program was implemented with high fidelity and favorable outcomes. This is the goal of the prevention strategies. Programs or strategies are fully implemented as planned and the outcomes are favorable. In this case, where full fidelity had occurred, you can say that this is truly the program or the strategy that we had selected. And in this case, where full fidelity has occurred, you can see where you're going to have the outcomes and the changes that you're anticipating. Whether it's increased from knowledge or attitudes, change from pre or post test, or reduction in risk factors, they are driving underage drinking or increased awareness due to media campaigns. When we look at this report and you look at this opportunity to gauge, are you having your outcomes as intended? The programs were implemented as planned, objectives were met, the program is likely to contribute to a favorable outcome. When you see on the flip side of that, where programs were not implemented as planned, thus it cannot be credited with contributing to the favorable outcomes. So what you'll see is that on this objective and this outcomes is that you can determine if you are implementing with fidelity or if you are just taking pieces out of the program as a whole. So it really helps you identify along the lines of implementation of your program if you're doing the program as it was intended. Now, something that I think will help make even more sense is when we look at why fidelity is important. When you have high fidelity and you look at this illustration, the process towards achieving high fidelity, when a strategy is implemented, the goal to achieve high fidelity of implementation of the curriculum and instructional practices, you're increasing the credibility. And when you increase the credibility of your program, I often think that this is an opportunity too for you to increase the credibility and increase the likelihood of sustainability. If you have a very credible program, that it is doing what it is intended to do, you identified that you will have this impact, you've shared with people that this is what we will intend to see, then you're, for lack of a better word, you're putting your money where your mouth is and you're having great success. So I often think that through fidelity, that you're ensuring that your programs will be successful, and you're also ensuring the likelihood that this can be supported long term. If there's a high rate of fidelity in the implementation strategy, this enables us to rule out any variables as far as what will happen. If we're doing it with fidelity, we know we're going to get our intended outcome. We're not leaving anything to guess. If scientifically based curriculum and instructional practices are implemented as they were designed, the program outcomes should be better and more consistent. I often think of this as the best example I find that I share is kind of like a cookie recipe. My grandma makes the best oatmeal chocolate chip cookies, the best. And I find that I have tried to do her recipe, and my intent is that I want my cookies to taste just like my grandma's, but I have a tendency not to always understand some of her ingredients. Like, who in the world knew what oleo was? I'm sure there's some of you on here who know what oleo is, but I had determined that, oh, it must mean that it's butter. And sure enough, it was butter, but not just regular old margarine, butter with sugar or salt, unsweetened. You know, there's all sorts of different butters. Well, I didn't talk to the developer of the recipe, and I just made a guess. And I got the butter that had just regular old on sale butter, and it had salt added. I made the cookies as I thought that it was supposed to. I didn't follow the ingredients as intended. And I got cookies that tasted okay, but they did not taste like my grandma's cookies. So I did follow the ingredients, but I didn't follow them to the T. So I got something. I got a cookie, but it didn't taste like my grandma's, and that's what I was wanting to have. So again, just kind of going back to that analogy is I will get something at the end of my cookie recipe, but it's not going to be intended and what I was really hoping for, and put all that energy to create a cookie, and I got a somewhat decent cookie, but it still wasn't my grandma's. So with that being said, when you have outcomes that are better and the strategies and programs increase credibility and reliability, you basically are then going to find that persons that you work with, maybe your community, maybe the staff, they're going to find that you're going to have higher success, and you're going to have maintain that credibility through continued faithful implementation of your program. And in my case, if I would have made the cookie as intended, I would have had more people excited about eating my cookie. And every time I would make it, then they would look forward to it. Whereas now, my grandma's really the only one who will make those cookies consistently and consistently well. So you might be asking yourself, what can you do to ensure fidelity? And I skipped over a slide, so I'm going to go back. There we go. I get excited, I guess, when I'm sharing with you guys all sorts of exciting information. What can you do to ensure that you have high fidelity? Really good question. It's basically understand what your active ingredients are, understanding what it is that you're going to be involved in your programs and action plans. Make sure you have all those ingredients present. Make sure that this is kind of what we were talking about earlier with Lisa, that there's the part of the program differentiation. Always overestimate how long of time it will take. It always takes longer than you anticipated. Best laid plans, if you think it's going to take a week, it's probably going to take closer to a month. Making sure that you have your supports needed. You don't really want to be prepared off guard. I know I worked with a community that was going to have parent trainings, and they decided they wanted to have just a handful of parent trainers. And after much discussion, it was determined we pretty much wanted to double. So we went from where they had indicated they were just going to have 5 to where they would have 10 parent trainers. Because as all of us know, everyone's busy. And finding times that work for everyone's schedule, of those 10 that they had encouraged to be involved in the parent training itself, only 8 were available to be able to be fully trained and to actually be parent trainers. Anticipate difficulties when implementation of new practices. It's a change. When you are doing something different, there's going to be some quirks that you're going to need to work out, and some things that you're going to learn along the ways, as far as how you can do things even better, in the sense of how can we publicize this through our community? How can we make sure that we're communicating with everyone that we're implementing this strategy, and how we can communicate that even better? So anticipate that there could be some difficulties. I always call it that Murphy's Law. And it's always better to look at the difficulty as it's a lesson. And every lesson comes with an opportunity to learn. Ask for help. That's what we're here for. The Kansas Prevention Collaborative has a group of a lot of people that are really anxious and willing to help. Also think about your peers across the state, in the sense that they have insight. And really that's what we're here for. We're here to provide assistance and making sure that you have the best resources possible, so that you can offer the best resources for your communities. Continuing monitoring, making sure to, my kids always say, I used to say this to my kids all the time, I inspect what I expect. And what I mean by that is that if I expect something to go really well and I expect something to do well, then I need to be there and making sure that everything is going as I intended. So continuing monitoring is super important in making sure that you're going to be successful. You've created a plan, so making sure that that plan is followed. Also, the great thing about a plan is that, for example, it's just not one person's responsibility, that it allows for others to be involved. And if the plan is there and it is easily identified who seeks this role, who will do that, then it's easy to make sure that it can be implemented. Analyze the data to identify some possible reasons for those programs not performing as expected. You might find that, after looking at materials that initially I thought this was the reason that things weren't moving forward. As you looked at your data and you found that perhaps that you weren't implementing the program as often and as frequently as it should be. And so that's an easy fix. You can offer it more often, or you might find that you're offering a program during homecoming season when everyone's super busy, and that is not a good time to have that program. So it allows you opportunities to modify. What you can do to ensure fidelity. Prevention education, and when you look at those fidelity checklists and when you look at how you can ensure that you're going to be most successful, complete and submit your fidelity checklist at least once during the implementation, your strategy implementation. It's really difficult to do a fidelity checklist once the strategy is already completed. So you need to look at that, planning those during the time frame that you can make some mid-course corrections. For example, if you are facilitating a program within a school and you take the pre-test, and then at the end you have the post-test, and then you do a fidelity checklist at the end, and you're really not going to see if there were perhaps what may have happened in between. It's kind of one of those things is on a road trip. You need to have that roadmap as far as where you're going, and so that you know that if you're going to get to your destination, if you just jump in your car and you just hope that you're going to make it to Colorado, but you don't have any intent on how you're going to get there, most likely you may get lost unless you've been there before. So thinking about your environmental strategies. As part of your monitoring plan, the evaluation and the training teams, we're going to review those quarterly reports and action plans and provide you feedback as needed. Environmental strategies are a really great opportunity to have big impact within your communities, but making sure too that you're following a plan that will allow you to have proper implementation of programs, and making sure that you're following the intended purpose of the environmental strategies. I know we make this sound super easy because you've created those plans, but one of the things that's most important with fidelity is that you are following your plan, and then that way you will have your intended outcome. I've spoke really quickly about some things that can ensure that you will be successful. I know that we have people on the line that have had some really good luck with creating those plans and following strategies with fidelity and making sure that their programs resulted as they intended. And so I think that one of the things that's been really great about working with the KPC is that you look to recognize that there's a wealth of information out there to ensure that we're doing programs as they were intended. I would like to offer that we have some time to share, to have some questions asked, making sure that everything that we shared today made sense, making sure that you know how the fidelity reports and how the implementation report can work. I know Lisa and I both are online, and so if you have any questions, this would be the great time to have those opportunities for those questions to be asked. And I don't know if there were any questions in the chat as I was ramming through, but.
Heather.
Like I said, I think this is such an important topic that, sorry.
No, go ahead, Lisa.
Chad, I was just going to reiterate, this is such an important topic that sometimes we just take for granted. We think, okay, we've got an evidence-based strategy, we're going to implement it, we're going to see great outcomes. But you can see kind of through this webinar, I hope you can see all the different reasons why that isn't always the case, and why it is important to assess fidelity and make sure that everything's in place, because it can explain a lot, and you want to catch those things to make mid-course corrections if needed, if you can, so that you can have the greater likelihood of getting those positive outcomes that you want, that you're investing so much time in with your strategies. Go ahead, Chad.
I think that's a great point, Lisa. I'm glad that you brought that up too again. And yeah, just the importance of the monitoring fidelity and the outcomes and objectives that you have that you're measuring along the way. And if you need to make those adjustments, you can, and you can know better sooner rather than later. The only thing, Heather, in the chat was, as far as something close to questions, was a invitation to you to bring your grandmother's cookies, the best cookies, to a future prevention work, so that we can all do our efforts of monitoring fidelity and then also evaluating the best cookies.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I've found is that, don't just assume you know what something is, what it means. Really ask those questions, because like I said, I kind of made an assumption and the cookie did not taste the same. So I might bring you up, I might take you guys up on that and see if my grandma will make the cookies though. I think that does bring up, though, a really good point in thinking along the lines of when your communities create those action plans, and if you were involved and you're reading something and it doesn't make sense, asking questions even of your the coalition as a whole, making sure that it is being followed as intended. I really feel like that this is your opportunity to really shine with those programs, and also to make sure that there's opportunities for course correction, and also times to celebrate that you went through all that work. Now we're getting to implement and see some changes, and little mini celebrations of, look, we're already having some of those intended celebrations. Now, any training that you ever do with us, we don't let you not have an evaluation. And so, I guess I do need to share this, right, Lisa? These are the references and the credits. I'm just going to buzz through them, though, because they're super exciting, but I don't want to read them. We do have our evaluation, and I know that Chad was going to put that into our chat, but we're also going to send it out, am I correct, via email, so that you can fill out the evaluations and help us to make sure that we get better in providing these resources and materials to you, so that you're best equipped to do good work and prevention work across the state.
Yeah, you are correct, Heather. I placed the link to the evaluation in the chat, and then we'll also include that in an email as a follow-up to this webinar, which will include the slide deck and a link to the recording of the recorded live webinar. Yeah, does anybody have questions or challenges to share with implementing with Fidelity?
Now, I know we weren't that crystal clear.
And I'll just point out, I think this is another opportunity for you to really realize how important things that when you're doing your annual updates to your action plans for environmental strategies, that you take those action steps you take and you plan out for a year, all of those activities that are going to really make sure that you've got the right frequency, that you've got the right dosage, that you're hitting your right targets, that all of that's spelled out in the action plan, because that's what your plan is, and that's what we'll be kind of looking at Fidelity for. So making sure that those action plans are complete and have enough steps that really clearly define your strategy. So again, tying back to those documents you're doing are really important documents. They're not just things you do once and you put away. They really are being used and need to continue to be developed. and updated.
Just ensuring your success long term.
Yeah, and really, when you do the fidelity check and you're maybe not hearing anything back, that there's no compliance issues, as Heather said, that's a really reason to celebrate. Sometimes no news is good news, and you can celebrate your successes as you're implementing according to your plan, and you have high fidelity on those prevention education programs as well.
Well, if there aren't any questions, this allows for a really great opportunity for you to use a little bit of this time to fill out that evaluation. And this would be a great time then to so gain 30 minutes in your day, which, that doesn't happen every day. And I look forward to your continued success. And I also look forward to hearing from any and all if you have any questions for us, or how maybe to connect with some of your peers across the state to ensure that you are implementing your strategies with Fidelity and maybe some lessons learned. So with that, on behalf of the KPC, I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Lisa, are you staying on for a bit?